housekeeping things to get through at any rate. So as I mentioned, this is the ROR Community Call for March 2026. We invite you to tell us in the chat who you are and where you're joining from, why you're interested in ROR, how you're using it right now, or how you plan to use it. We'd love to hear that in the chat, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. This is what we're going to talk about today. We are welcoming you now. We are giving you some general housekeeping information. I'm going to do a little bit of a segment which I think of in my mind as ROR Out and About, blog posts we've published, events we're going to, events we have just done, that kind of thing. Our product lead, Adam Buttrick, is going to give us a general overview of the work we've done in the first quarter, which is nearly over, and that includes both data updates, technical updates, and all kinds of things. I'm going to talk for quite a while about some people who are using ROR, some systems who are using ROR. Some of these are new integrations, some of them are just interesting ones, and some of them are going to be featured on future ROR community calls, so you can get a little preview of what's coming up. We're then going to have two presentations from ROR users. We're going to start with a presentation from Ivana of OA Switchboard. I'm sorry, is somebody advancing the slides? You might want to be careful not to do that. Maybe I'll just advance them for a bit. That slide control feature in Zoom is very useful, but also a little dangerous. You need to make sure not to touch those. Anyway, so we are going to have two featured ROR integrators today. We're going to have Ivana Kampfens from OA Switchboard talk about use of ROR in OA Switchboard. And then we're going to hear a joint presentation from Europe PMC and SciLife Lab about a kind of a very interesting way they're surfacing SciLife Lab's publications in Europe PMC. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. And we do encourage you as well to add questions in the chat as we go along. We're happy to answer those, and we have ROR staff monitoring the chat. So just letting you know about these community calls, we hold these every other month. They are open to everyone. We focus on what we've been doing and what we're planning to do. We're always happy to hear from you about topics you'd like us to address, work you'd like us to do. We announce them on our community forum, on our events webpage, and on our social media. These are meetings, not webinars, so we really do encourage you to use the chat heavily and talk with one another in the chat. We do record the calls, and we publish the recordings publicly as well as the slides on our event page, and those we will email those to all registrants afterwards, so you will get those. It usually takes a few days, so usually probably early next week you'll receive the recording and the slides. We do ask you to abide by our code of conduct, which is quite standard for as these things go. And we do have a policy of not allowing AI note takers and other kinds of bots in our meetings, primarily to prevent that from being used as training data. But we do provide transcripts, of course, of these that you can look at afterwards, and the materials later on. So those are fully available to you. You can also download the chat. If you're finding that there are useful links in the chat, you should be able to do that. Also, if English is not your primary language, feel free to use show captions in Zoom to show captions in your language. You also can get involved beyond these calls. You can submit issues and bug reports to us on the ROR roadmap. You can join our discussion channels, such as the community forum and the technical forum. The technical forum gets notifications of new updates to the registry, as well as things that affect our API, all that kind of thing. And of course, anyone is welcome to submit a curation request, ask us to update a ROR record or add a new ROR record. And we invite you as well to always tell us if you are using ROR. Most of the known users of ROR are featured on our integrations list, but you can always just email us or fill out a form that is linked there to tell us about how you're using ROR. So, ROR Out and About. These are the blog posts that we've published this year. We had a wonderful, the first one is really kind of a launch announcement from the Major Research Funding Council in the Netherlands, which I believe is where Ivana is based. mentioning that they are exposing ROR IDs in their API, which is great. And their API is used by CRIS systems in the Netherlands, universities, institutions, that kind of thing. The Dutch Research Council is a friend to open funding metadata in particular. So you can read all about that on our blog. We did publish a post, in addition to publishing all of the recordings and the slides from our annual meeting in early February. We wrote a bit of a recap post, so if you'd rather just skim something in text, that post is available on our blog as well. We had 3 great sessions. We had a general State of ROR community update. We had a session on ROR and research funders at which Hans de Jonge spoke. And we had a great session on ROR and national research strategies in the Asia Pacific region. Another recent blog post we put out that I'm very excited about was essentially a case study of how ROR is used in the publishing platform Janeway. We had Janeway present last year on one of our ROR community calls in September or November, I think. And we've published a blog post to follow up from that has a lot of great screenshots. And one of the unusual features of how Janeway is using ROR is that they're doing something which I really think all systems should do, which is that in addition to allowing people to enter their affiliation in a look-ahead powered by the ROR API, they can also pull ROR from ORCID records if the author registers from ORCID. So if you're interested in that use case for getting ROR IDs from the ORCID API, I suggest that you read how Janeway has very carefully designed that. I found it quite a fascinating post. And then just recently, we published a blog post about Europe PMC and SciLife Lab, and you're going to hear from them at the end of this session. Two ways of hearing about that, at least. We have already had several events this year. We did, for Love Data Week, we did a webinar with World Data System on persistent identifiers, really encouraging that research data community to use ROR. We just recently had an Open Alex webinar, mostly aimed at librarians who are tasked with tracking research analytics for their institution on why it's important to update your information in ROR so that feeds Open Alex. Open Alex has also recently launched a feature whereby certain members can correct any incorrect affiliations in Open Alex through a web-based interface that Open Alex has recently launched. So you can see a demo of that. Again, recording and slides for all of these are on the ROR website. We have links to those. So if you missed it, you can still watch it. Just this morning, a few hours ago, I presented at a marvelous webinar based in Poland on DSpace. DSpace, of course, is a very widely used institutional repository. It's an open source system, and ROR has been supported in DSpace since version 8. They are currently working on releasing version 10. There are other flavors of DSpace that ROR is built into, so it's a very widely used software, and it was really great to connect with that community and talk to them about ROR. And so eventually the recording and slides from that will also be published. And I wanted to give a bit of a teaser for our next community call in May, so about 2 months from now. We're going to feature Jason Portnoy from the data science team at Crossref to talk about their initiative to match funder names to ROR IDs directly within Crossref metadata. It's a major enrichment scheme that will probably be live by the time of the May call, or if not, then shortly afterward. So Jason has already agreed to talk to us about that. And we're also going to see a presentation by Peter Aspeslot on the, I'm sorry, that's a misprint. It's the Flemish Organization Registry, not the Flanders Organization Registry. And it's a very fascinating tool, so we'll see a little bit of that in May. We're going to several in-person conferences this year. These are only the ones we know about now. There may be more that we are going to attend this year. We're headed to the Elsevier Impact Conference in San Diego in a couple of weeks. We'll be at the STM US annual conference in Washington, D.C. a little bit later in April. We're giving a presentation at the Council of Science Editors Conference in early May. We'll be in Singapore in early June, and then PIDFest in October. So PIDFest, Persistent Identifier Fest. This will be at an organization called SURF, which is a sort of a higher education IT organization in the Netherlands. We have submitted proposals to go there, and it is an international conference on persistent identifiers. The theme this year is keeping knowledge connected. So if you are at all interested in PIDs, we encourage you to attend that. One last little minor thing before I turn things over to Adam is that we have an issue open to add the ROR logo to a thing called the Font Awesome Library. This is, if you don't know what it is, you probably don't need to know. It's a very, very widely used character library whereby you can use images as though they were text. The ORCID logo is part of the Font Awesome library, and there is an issue out there to also add the ROR logo to it, which would make it easier for software developers essentially to incorporate the ROR logo. So if you have 5 seconds, click that link, upvote this issue just by clicking on the little arrow at the top of it. And this might be a great deal of help to a lot of software developers who are using the ROR logo in their applications. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to ROR product lead Adam Buttrick to tell us about ROR's work in Q1. Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And hi, everyone. I'm Adam Buttrick. I'm the product manager for ROR. Just want to talk through some updates on what we've been up to this quarter. Next slide, please. So our immediate focus has been really on a number of technical and workflow improvements to our curation processes to support increasing demand. So if you've been following ROR's work for a long time, you'll know that our curation pipeline involves a lot of complex mix of human judgment and automated review. So lots of people and robots acting on all of the requests that are submitted. But as that kind of grows, we need to think about how all of those things interact with each other to continue to manage that work effectively. So to this end, we've really been investing a lot of time into new tools and processes to do things like help us better and automatically prioritize requests using signals like the total known count of affiliations associated with the organization as a proxy for the request urgency. Then at the same time, really doing some further automation of the more technical steps involved with our review kind of data quality and data publication processes, making sure that more of those tasks are just really happening automatically and are not too complex or burdensome to orchestrate. So having all of that work in place it really allows us to coordinate things more efficiently, as I said, at these higher volumes, which is especially important because at the same time, we've also been introducing some new help around our actual curation work. So bringing on some additional contract staff to help us push down that curation request queue. So the goal here is that we can address as many community requests as possible while making sure that we continue to meet the high bar of metadata quality and completeness, which we know that folks kind of rely on us to provide. Next slide, please. For the registry data itself, Q1 has been a really focused mix of wrapping up some threads from late last year and then kicking off some exciting new work. So if you had the chance to attend our annual community meeting that Amanda talked about at the top of the hour, you'll recall that we've been doing a lot of work with the National Institute of Science and Technology Policy in Japan to reconcile their organizational dictionary with our own account of Japanese research organizations. So at the very tail end of last year, we were able to complete that reconciliation for academic, nonprofit, and kind of state, meaning government organizations. And now I've really been focused on reconciling that outstanding set of records for Japanese companies engaged in research activities. So we've got all the data for these organizations now largely prepared, and we'll be rolling it out across our next few releases. These efforts around Japan have been quite timely and important as the National Institute of Informatics in Japan just recently launched the Japan Open Science Monitor, which we'll link to in the chat. So this monitor follows the example of the work that was first developed by our friends at the French Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Space. So it provides all kinds of great analytics about open access publication rates in Japan by making use of open Alex data, and so by extension ROR, where we're the institutional model. Next slide, please. So speaking of France, in Q1, we've also seen really great and extensive and continued engagement from university systems there, mostly focused on fleshing out their institutional hierarchies. But we also just published a large set of updates for the national level research infrastructure, INRAE, the National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food, and Environment, kind of to more correctly and completely describe the research units that they sponsor, which are quite extensive. Community interest in the new Open Alex Grants Index project has also prompted us to weave in some additional funder record updates in our upcoming releases. And last but not least, we are also doing a lot of dedicated work to improve how society organizations are represented in ROR. So you remember there was a blog post and some conversation about this at the end of last year. We were already undertaking a project to do large-scale reconciliation of Crossref publisher members, which just so happens to overlap with these society organizations. So we're targeting those first, and again, rolling them out over the course of the next couple of releases. Next slide. On the tech side, our work to make single search the default affiliation matching strategy is underway. As hopefully Ivana will attest to in a bit, this will make ROR's affiliation matching more accurate and efficient for everyone. But really, before we can make that switch, what we need to do is complete some infrastructure work to better isolate our environments, which we expect to wrap up over the course of the next month or so. And then from there, we want to move into some core technology upgrades that will help to keep our API and services kind of stable and more performant. And then in June, we're planning to kick off some user sessions focused on a UI refresh. This is for our web search, which many of you, I'm sure, interact with. So if you have thoughts about how to use ROR's web search, stay tuned because we'll want to hear from you. But the goal is then that we'll be able to do this refresh based on user feedback and release in the fall. So that's all from me. I'm going to turn things back over to Amanda. In the interest of time, I'm happy to address any questions in the chat, however.
Thank you so much, Adam. Yeah, I think our web search in particular, it works very well already, but I'm kind of looking forward to those UI enhancements to it. I think we also talked about potentially adding what I think of as advanced search, so filters for country and that kind of thing, which will be great. All right, so I'm going to talk to you now about just a few new and interesting users of ROR. I wanted to mention, this actually happened last fall, but I think we neglected to mention it in our November call. And it's really quite an exciting thing. So for those of you who know about preprint servers, of course, archive.org is the primary preprint server. They have been hoping to integrate ROR for quite a while, but there are lots of sort of discipline-specific preprint servers that use the archive model. And two of those that are have been very widely used are bioRxiv and medRxiv, which are, of course, for the biological sciences, and for medicine, which overlap quite a bit. And late last year, both of those preprint servers, at least one of which was run by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, merged and are now under the umbrella of a new organization called Open Archive. And as part of that, I don't know how closely it was related to the organizational switch, but what they did announce was support for ROR in these systems, which is really great and really exciting. I've reached out to them to see if we can get them on a future ROR community call, but it's definitely something to explore. ROR in those systems, I think, is very influential because they are very widely used preprint servers. BMJ Analytics is a fairly widely used software for tracking, again, health research, medical research, and ROR is incorporated into that. Again, we'd love to hear from them later in the year. Vivo, which many institutions use as sort of expert finder systems, has incorporated ROR into its ontology in 2025. I'd love to hear more about that on a future call. I mentioned earlier that we are going to hear from Jason Portnoy of Crossref in May. We are going to hear from Peter Aspeslach in May as well about the Flemish Organization Registry. And and here's Peter now, actually joining right now, joining the call right now. And the other thing, and I really encourage you to click on this link, it's very fun to explore. Quite recently, DataCite launched, and we heard a little teaser of this at the ROR annual meeting, but DataCite has launched metadata quality dashboards. I don't think they're called quality dashboards, but data site metadata dashboards, which I think are primarily for those who are contributing metadata to DataCite, where they can see how good is our metadata, how complete is our metadata, are we using identifiers in the proper way. And I am going to show you a few screenshots from those a little bit later. We are also, do have somebody confirmed for the July community call from LMU München, who has built a really nice DataCite metadata generator in a nice UI. So a lot of people are registering metadata with DataCite using Fabrica. A lot of people are depositing XML, but this is an organization that has done a nice ROR-enriched interface whereby others can submit metadata to DataCite. And then we'll talk a little bit about ROR is in DSpace. I'd like to do a little bit more featuring of DSpace this year, but if you are a DSpace user, or if you know of DSpace users, ROR is supported in many versions of those. DSpace 10 should be released this year, and it has lots of really interesting and great ROR features. So we'd love to learn more from them and hear from them this year. The charts. It's time for the charts. I'm starting with the ORCID one now, which I don't always do. For those of you who have been following along with ROR in ORCID, ORCID was quite an early adopter of ROR, but ORCID does support several organization identifiers. You can see this goes back to the beginning of 2024, going back to, we've about 10 million, I never can do the commas correctly. Fewer than 1 million ROR IDs to over 7 million, 7.8 million ORCID records with ROR IDs. And that's just for like the totality of ORCID records. For new ORCID records, ROR is really the default. They've told us that far more than 95% of new ORCID records have affiliations that are linked to ROR IDs. So you can just see that line going up and up and up in ORCID, which we love to see. So again, this chart shows the totality of organization identifiers in ORCID by type. This was less than 50% even a year ago. So we're now at nearly 2/3 of, for all ORCID records, including all of the older ones, are including ROR IDs. And so that's getting, we're getting closer and closer to 100% of ORCID records with ROR IDs. I wanted to talk about Crossref and DataCite metadata right now. Top providers of ROR IDs in Crossref DOIs include American Physical Society. Hello, Arthur. We have a representative here from this excellent publisher. eLife always does well. American Chemical Society always does well. Most of those ROR IDs are coming from ChemArchive, another one of these really widely used preprint servers. And Ben Mudrak is going to co-present with me at CSE. I think Ben is on the call. Hello, Ben. So we love to see these people doing a great job with their metadata. And I've highlighted OpenArchive here just because, again, they are in these top 10 providers of ROR IDs to Crossref. This used to be Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. They've done a sort of a title transfer thing where now, because they have a new separate nonprofit organization that runs these two preprint servers, those are showing up there. In DataCite, this list almost never changes. This, by the way, is ROR IDs anywhere in any record for any use in both Crossref and DataCite. And this is going to become important later. You can see that one thing I'd like to point out here is that fifth organization in the DataCite list, CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, most of that, of course, is coming from Zenodo, the very widely used generalist repository that is run by CERN. Here's a chart of ROR IDs in Crossref metadata over time. We're currently a little bit over 700,000. And so looking forward to that 1 million mark, hopefully soon. And you can see like a really strong rate of increase even just since the middle of the last year. This big spike here is when the Worldwide Protein Data Bank began using ROR IDs in Crossref DOIs, but there's plenty of other activity there. How people are using ROR IDs in Crossref is always interesting. Primarily, people use ROR IDs for affiliations. That's the original use case for ROR. It's still a very popular use case. There is over 7% of these records are using ROR IDs for funders, and the majority of those are from funders who are registering grant DOIs with Crossref and using ROR ID to identify themselves and the affiliated institution of the principal investigators. This last category, records with ROR IDs for institutions, that the institution element, it tends to be the organization that is hosting a repository type of thing. It can be, it has multiple uses, but again, it's one common use case for ROR in Crossref. Here's a few charts. The DataCite schema supports ROR in essentially 3 ways. So one of those is for creator or contributor metadata. 99.7% of DataCite records that have an identifier at all are using ROR, and that is over 39 million records. In the DataCite metadata schema, ROR is also used to identify publishers. And again, this often in the DataCite context doesn't mean publisher as we would usually think of it. It means, someone who is hosting a repository. It might also be a publisher in the traditional sense, but it just means who is making this repository available. And again, 99.1% of DataCite records that have an identifier at all are using ROR for that. But here's another chart. ROR can also be used for funder metadata in DataCite records, and less than 2% of those records with the funder identifier are using ROR. Now, this is not as bad as this looks, and I'll explain why in just a moment. This looks like, oh no, bad ROR adoption for funders, but it isn't actually quite that bad, and I'll explain why in a moment. One of the reasons is that, as we showed back here, one of the major contributors of DataCite records is Japan's National Institute for Fusion Science, and they do use funder IDs to identify themselves as the funder and other funders. So that's one reason. It's just the largest contributor of records to DataCite uses funder IDs. But the other reason, here's another chart that shows sort of a better version. There is quite high adoption of ROR IDs for funders. Again, just since beginning of 2022, we've gone from 0 to over 700,000. That's not bad. But here's something that we learned quite recently. So NIFS uses funder IDs, and they are, they've contributed, over 35 million records to DataCite. But you can see that the second one here is CERN, which runs Zenodo. And of course, Zenodo is very huge. They're approaching 1 million records. And what we learned quite recently, and you can see from the DataCite metadata dashboards, if you go to the one for Zenodo, is that Zenodo is also mostly using Crossref funder IDs, which is peculiar because we have in fact talked to Zenodo before, and we know that they have built their funder model around ROR. They do also use funder identifiers. They get some of those from OpenAir and so on. You can see that for affiliations coming from Zenodo, over 93% of those are using ROR. So this number is sort of oddly low. And what we found is that there's a bug. There's a bug in the Zenodo software. Zenodo is run on a software called Invenio RDM. And just this week, we've discovered that Invenio RDM has not been exporting the ROR IDs in the funder identifier scheme. So that's why those numbers have been unusually low. We think this bug is going to get resolved soon, and that's going to really bump up those numbers in DataCite. So just kind of a really fascinating little insight. All right, with that, again, happy to answer any questions about those. Please tell us if you know of any ROR integrations that we haven't identified. But Ivana, if you're ready, I think we can hand things over to you to talk about ROR in OA Switchboard. Ivana?
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I have switched off my video because my Wi-Fi is a bit shaky, so just to be sure. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really excited. I'm going to thank Amanda and Adam up front, in the middle, and at the end, because you've been amazing partners in making great progress in us using the ROR API. Let's see how the control works. Where did you put my slides, Amanda?
So sorry. I did add them, but I needed to reload them. I'm reloading them.
Ah,
All right. I thought I had done this. Okay. Now.
here we are. Here we are. For those of you who don't know Switchboard, just 2 minutes because it's important. We are not building a database. I can't stress that enough. We're a metadata exchange hub that is not for profit. It's collaborative. It's been around since 2019, and we've always used ROR as the mechanism to route what we call messages from one stakeholder to the other. It is to simplify the sharing of information, read metadata, between publishers, institutions, and funders. And what is extremely important is authoritative data, which means it's data from the publisher systems. We're not interpreting, we're not enriching, we're doing nothing to these data. We only use the ROR API and do something to do the routing. But very important, we get authoritative data from the publisher timely, which means event-driven, instantaneously, an article, journal article, or a book chapter or a book being rolled out at the moment. But the moment the publication is done, automatically, instantaneously, a package of metadata is being sent to research institutions, funders, and consortia. And obviously, we do that in an aggregated, standardized way through the switchboard. That is what this is all about. This reduces transactional cost. It's a traditional intermediary, and it's a safe space because we're not for profit. Nobody owns us, and we can't be taken over. The controls. Here we are. So the keywords: independently managed shared infrastructure, provides a safe space for publication metadata, collaboration, standardized protocol, allows for the transparent exchange of data about publications. We also actually do non-OA articles, designed to operate and integrate with all stakeholder systems. And it's easing the administrative burden of maintaining many-to-many relationships, both in person and technically to exchange information. So as I already said, it's mostly actually 99.9%. So let's assume all of our messages that flow through the switchboard are one way, going from a publisher to an institution or a funder or a consortium for that matter. And as I said, the routing of these packages of metadata is based on ROR IDs. Now, how does that work? Publishers might have ROR IDs in their systems and in their metadata, and they could connect to the API themselves. But actually, for quite a majority, 24, 26 publishers out of the 47, we are helping them with a little piece of software, which is called a custom connector. And this is where we're going to talk about the ROR API and what we're doing to do the routing as good as possible. Again, not changing anything to the underlying structured metadata. So basically what we get, this is an automatic feed. It's all instantaneous. As I mentioned, for journal articles, it's the JETS XML, which is being configured to be sent automatically to the OA Switchboard SFTP server. Then, what was the problem? This looks a bit ugly, but if you want to get this whole PDF, which contains all the information of what we've done, I can also share it with you. So what was happening? Due to our own approach, but maybe also, and Adam and Amanda can say more about that, due to the multi-search method that we've been using, but also honestly, the way we were using a multi-search, we were getting what we call not for me notifications, which means we had identified we thought we had identified the ROR ID for, say, an affiliation, but it was the wrong one. And then our routing would send that package of metadata to the incorrect recipient. And we've, due to a new feature we have introduced last year, we've been able to systematically analyze all of these messages to see where it was going wrong. Quite coincidental, maybe, I don't know, Amanda and Em can speak about that. Around the same time that we were drawing our conclusions, you guys introduced the single search strategy with the blog post on the 2nd of December, which was extremely helpful and encouraging. And that was the moment I was driving Amanda and Adam crazy with emails and questions and understanding not whose fault something was, but to understand why something was going wrong. And I think it's fair to say we both learned a lot. And we were adamant and keen as a not-for-profit collaborative initiative ourselves to work with others in this space like ROR. So that was the reason we wanted to get better in our accuracy and the number of P1 messages, as we call them, being delivered to our recipients and get the right ones out there. So how did we, based on from our analysis and learning from the ROR approach and the new strategy, we wanted to achieve three things. First of all, increase the chances for more matches. So what we do, maybe I wasn't clear enough, we take structured metadata from the JETS XML for both author affiliations and research funders. We did something with these structured metadata called a ROR API and retrieve a ROR identifier. And to do a better job and to get more matches, we decided or concluded that we had to change our input string. So what we were sending to the ROR API. Second, we really needed to reduce the chances for false positives. And this had to do with the matching strategy. We were using the multi-search and we concluded, and I'll say a bit more about that indeed for us, the single search would work better. And thirdly, reduce these false positives by changing our approach to the logic of interpreting what was coming back. So that's what I will talk about. We did three things. We changed what we were sending to the ROR API for the matching. We used a different matching strategy, the new one, and we changed the approach of interpreting the results. Now, what we've done, over 20 publishers, I already mentioned, we worked with the NM and Amanda to a great extent, also with JETS XML experts in the network, in the industry, a lot of people I talked to about understanding and interpreting the structured metadata in JETS XML. We talked to others in the ecosystem who are using the ROR API to understand what they are doing and if they had already tested the new approach. We talked to our publishers, we talked to our advisory group members and our own tech partner, obviously. And this is actually from February, we used this wonderful tool manually, but it didn't matter. Again, it taught us a lot. Adam, you had developed this great, simple tool on GitHub where you can easily put and play around with different input strings and indeed see the difference of the outcome from both the single and the multi-search. So we've done that manually, but again, sometimes that doesn't matter. If it's early days, you learn a lot from these things. So then what are we changing and how are we doing that? So this is a lot of maybe technical detail, even too much for me, but what is very important, I mentioned three things. We are changing our input string. So what we are doing from the JETS XML, take where it is possible, ideally, a combination of institution, country, and city. And that would then together make our input string. If only institution is available, that's what we'll take. If only institution and country is available, that's what we'll take. If only institution and city is available, that is what we'll take as input string. If there's more, we will not use it. And I'll show that in a minute. Because here are two examples from two anonymous publishers. The first one is actually example number 3, but it was a nice one to show. Here you see that there is something like a department here, like School of Biology and Ecology. The institution is University of Maine. City is Orono. And then there is part of the country, I think that's state, probably, ME, postal code, and the country. And we ignore the postal code, we ignore the department, we ignore the state, we only, and here it shows further down, our business rule is then that the input string, what we call institution, source affiliation, University of Maine, Orono, USA. The second example is a publisher using JETS XML in a slightly different way. They don't call it institution. They actually have address line, as you can see, and they put everything together. Well, then that's not true. We could do something else. I think in the past we would do something else, but now what we will do is actually take the whole lot. And that will then be our institution source affiliation. And that's what we will be submitting, change number 2, to the single search matching strategy. Quite some technical details, where that endpoint is and where you can find documentation, but the simple change is we stop using multi-search and we are using single search. And the third is interpretation. We using the multi-search, but again, I might be losing it here, Adam and Amanda. There might be different results that you could interpret with single search, or what we're doing now. It's really easy. It's either black or white, it's 0 or 1, it's true or false. And we will not do any interpretation anymore at our end of the results. We just only take it if it's true. If Adam tells us it's true, we take it. Otherwise, we don't. And this we have, I think this is already my last slide. I didn't have time, Amanda, for an end slide and a nice summary. But for each and every, and maybe back to the 14 or the 20 publishers that we've been testing this on, for virtually everybody and every JETS-XML and everything that we've tested using manually this approach of taking institution, city, and country, it worked. And it worked better than the multi-search. If not, I contacted Adam because it could be that there is something, and it was 1 or 2, Adam, but it did happen, and it was fantastic to see that you immediately responded. My favorite example is, I forgot it, this Italian university, which is one of the oldest in the world, and it was an Italian spelling of the name, and I think further to the whatever 8 or 10 different spellings of that university, you didn't have the one that we found in this JETS-XML, and it was a valid one. So just to show, sometimes there's also still to learn in the quality and the completeness of the ROR record itself, and really wonderful to see that you quickly help, sometimes adding a comma, sometimes adding a synonym or an acronym or whatever. And the publishers that we're now working with to implement all of this, we have suggested to indeed keep a list of institutions that don't have any ROR record at all, because that is the other situation. We did sometimes not find a match, but then it turned out that there wasn't a ROR ID at all. And that was the impetus, or the, how do you say that, the initiative to actually get the ROR ID created for that institution. Yeah, the publishers we're rolling this out with now is that we're encouraging them to keep a list, Excel, whether it's 2 or 20 or 200, and send it to the ROR people to actually help have these new records created. Because if there is no ROR record, of course, you don't find a match at all. And the other one, I'm sure Adam can say more about it, really complicated. I think we call them federated institutions. If there's a lot of hierarchy and combinations or multiple combinations of names possible, like University of London, I think is a famous example. It's really hard to get something. But where we are is we're now on the verge, I think we're implementing the first publishers to this new approach, and hopefully within, well, let's be realistic, 6 to 8 weeks, we will have all our 20 plus publishers on this new approach. And the goal is then to have less false positives and more matches in the first place. That's it, Amanda.
Perfect timing. Yes, thank you for showing this. I personally can nerd out for ages over those very different affiliation strings in different fields in the JETS and how you match those to actual ROR IDs using the ROR API, using a different matching strategy. So we really are looking forward to seeing that implemented in OA Switchboard. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand things over now to a presentation, sort of a joint presentation from Europe PMC and SciLife Lab. And we're going to hear from Alma Nielsen and from Jax. And feel free to take over.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for the opportunity. This is Jagdishwara Poluru, shortly Jax. I'm Senior Data Engineer at Europe PMC ML EBI. Along with me, Alma Nielsen is going to present Europe PMC Road to Sharing Curated Metadata from SciLife Lab. So, what's Europe PMC? Europe PMC is an open database for scientific literature. It provides comprehensive access to life sciences from trusted sources for everyone for free. We have over 47 million research outputs, mainly abstracts from PubMed, full text article from PMC, preprints from various resources, including bioRxiv, Research Square, and preprints.org. EuroPMC is developed by EBI, partnered with PubMed Central, and endorsed and supported by our funders as seen here. So before I start with the actual presentation, before I start with the actual presentation, I would like to touch base how we started ROR previously. We have a funder tool where grant has PI has various affiliation variations. So it is challenging to find and retrieve the grants data. Thanks to ROR, what we did was aggregated named variations under the primary name. Now over 80% of grants link to ROR ID, and also we enabled users to search for the grants by ROR ID. So what are the challenges which you would like to discuss along with the SciLife team help is that tracking research outputs. So inconsistent affiliation data makes tracking difficult, and also if you want to search various research outputs from the different organization, the data has been distributed, and there is no reliable way to track research outputs, their status, and also unstandardized data hinders open science. Now I'm going to hand over to Alma, how they're going to help open science by adding the links to EuroPMC with other challenges. So Alma, please, she's going to explain about SciLife Lab teamwork. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Jags. And hello, everybody. My name is Alma Nilsson, and I work with open science at SciLife Lab in Sweden. And SciLife Lab is a national government commissioned research infrastructure. And what that means is that we develop and maintain research infrastructure and data resources within life science. And this started as a collaboration between 4 different universities in Stockholm and Uppsala, but today we operate at all major universities in Sweden. And we collaborate with healthcare industry, large-scale acceleration labs like ESS and MaxIV, and international organizations. Part of SciLife Lab, NBIS, is the Swedish node in Elixir, that is the European Infrastructure for Biological Information, I think it stands for. And as of today, I think we have 600 staff scientists and about 1,800 yearly users of our platforms and services. So we and our affiliated researchers produce a lot of research products like publications. And so we have created our own databases to keep track of publications published by our units and our affiliated researchers. And these databases, or this set of publications, are at least mainly what was used to identify and add RORs to our publications in EuroPMC. And I believe, though it was a colleague who did this work, that we also complemented this information with, or these publications with a few, I think less than 1,000 from a monitoring system we have procured called OpenAir. But for our publication databases, they are populated by self-reporting, both from units and from our affiliated researchers. And as you can see, there is quite a lot of work. Oh, I should say also, everything is curated annually, manually by our SciLife Lab staff. So even though there is some data mining going into populating this affiliated publication, everything is curated manually. So yes, you can see there's quite a lot of work going into this local or internal solution that we have to tracking our outputs, and the addition of RORs is going to make it possible for us to hopefully simplify this process in the future. And I think immediately, of course, it gives us visibility for our outputs and also the ability to make comparisons with other organizations. So we are very happy to be part of this project. And I think now, Jags, you're going to take us through how that was actually done.
Thank you, Alma. So before, I'm going to present how you can find the research outputs from SciLife Lab. I'm going to little technical about how we did it. So first, we receive a data source from the SciLife Lab. They send us an email. So once the file has been received, we placed in our HPC cluster where our Python program, it processes the file. What it does, the source data has a unique identifier, in this case, a DOI. The DOI has been searched into our 47 million records and try to find if it has been available in your PMC. Once if it has been available and tries to add a link, so the research output now will be having a link with the ROR ID and is stored in the database. Because EuroPMC has very huge in both volume and size, it cannot readily available in public to the users. For that, we need to make it available via indexing. We use Solar indexing. What it does, it processes the impacted articles based on the priority, and it adds the metadata of an article. In this case, the ROR ID. Once the ROR ID has been added, and users can see and retrieve the article by using ROR ID. So this is an example with the SciLife Lab. Currently, we have over 16,500 research outputs from SciLife Lab. To search in EuroPMC, you have to use the Solar field org_id. As you see here, in the screenshot, org ID with the SciLife Lab, over 16.5K records. And on the left side, you can see there are various types, research outputs, preprints, and also how many full text articles available. Also, we will see, you can see how many of them are scattered across over the year. This is also, you can get information using our API with the same Solar field org_id. As a graph, we have currently SciLife Lab and MBEL who shares their curated data with us. I would like to thank them for their work. You can see MBEL has 6 different sites, and they have 6 unique ROR IDs. So that's why you can see all of them separately. And currently, SciLife Lab has more data in EuroPMC with ROR ID. So what is the future work we want to do ahead? Like, we want to automate the process. Instead of sending an email, we would like to enable them FTP so that they can send and the process picks up automatically, so no manual intervention, and they will receive an update once it is being processed. And as an organization, they keep on doing their good work, and we would like to integrate in the future updates, periodic updates, we would like to see them. And also, we would like to explore the new partnerships to expand our core data coverage. As I told you in the earlier slide, that we have a funder database with our information. We would like to see the feasibility integrating a funding database with the article database so that more coverage can be done. And finally, if you want to link us your research outputs to the ROR ID, you can drop us email to us, helpdesk@europmc.org. That's all from my end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate that. Europe PMC has really been at the forefront of ROR adoption in many ways. They are continually expanding their use of ROR. So we've published 3 blog posts about the work that Europe PMC has done, and this has been really great to see. All right, we are running a little over time, but we do still have 2 minutes left in the hour. I see there have been several questions and comments in the chat. But if you do have any questions or comments for our presenters or for the ROR team, feel free to unmute and ask them now. Or, of course, add them to the chat. I'll mention as well that we're always interested to hear from you about any plans you have to update or integrate ROR. We have Audrey Hamlisch here, who is one of the lead developers for Dryad. Dryad is continually adding cool new features, including with ROR. And I do appreciate, Audrey, your correction. You're mentioning that those DataCite metadata dashboards that I showed are a gray initiative, because I did neglect to mention that. But the Generalist Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative has been a great partner. Anyway, anything else? All right. I think that's it. If you have any questions at all for us, please email us at support@ror.org. We're always happy to respond to those. And we hope to see you at our next community call in May. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much to our presenters as well. We really appreciate your showing up and telling us all about your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.